Alright, time for our final video in a series on creating a Previs character model, trying to be as proportionally accurate as we can, so as to give us better Previs animations, a better sense of the character in space, but also actually use this as proportional reference when we start building in our final character model. If you can imagine, we would just pose this Previs character in, say, like an A pose, and then use her as reference to build up the cage for either a low poly or high poly model. Alright, let's get the hands and feet done. So we're going to use a series of wedges here. So to show you what I mean, let's create a cube. And now a wedge is going to be thin and wider on one end than the other. Simple as that. So we're going to give this a bit of a juxtaposition. We'll say it's wider at its base when viewed on the front, but wider at the top when viewed on the side. So just a bit of a slight juxtaposition there to give it a hint that it's more than just a simple wedge low poly cube. Turning that to 90 degrees, and let's bring that up to position at the wrist. Now, as always, I'm trying to match the next object with the width of the object above it. So let's get that matched to about the size, about the size of the wrist. I'm just going to rotate that slightly, as if they have their hand slightly bent. And the next piece is we're just going to duplicate that, flip it around, drop it down, and let's just make that bit at the end more narrow. Now, if you remember in our reference down here, her hands come to about mid-thigh. Or I should say her fingertips come to about mid-thigh, which is also dangerously close to that third headline. So, well, it looks like that's roughly where we are. Her fingertips come down to about mid-thigh, and it's pretty damn close to that third headline. So I'm happy with that wedge shape as it is. Now create the thumb. I'm actually going to steal the shape I've already created for the hand here. And the easiest way to do that is to just combine these two pieces and duplicate them over. Now, anything you combine can be separated later on, so don't worry too much about that. You'll find your combine tool up here under mesh and combine. Now, whenever you combine objects, it's going to create these empty groups here where those objects used to be. Now these groups are going to cause a lot of problems for you because you'll notice they still influence that object even though technically Maya considers it one piece. If you can imagine, having those groups hanging around in your outliner is really going to mess with your rigging later on. So whenever you combine an object, make sure you select that object and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. The moment I deleted that history, those groups went away, and now there is nothing influencing that object but the object itself. So I want to delete history frequently, so let's just actually make sure that that is on our shelf. There. Once again, all I have to do is hover over the object I want to add to the shelf and go Control and Shift. Okay, so now that that's been combined, we can easily duplicate it. And let's just get rid of that outliner for a second. Let's just rotate that just in one axis, not in all axes. Let's go maybe 90 degrees. And let's make that quite a bit smaller. So let's find out exactly where our thumb is. So if I'm looking, I'm looking down at my thumb now, as you should as well. The thumb joint comes pretty damn close to the wrist. So let's just make sure that it's not over the wrist, but it's basically on line with the top of the wedge that forms my palm. Now the tip of the thumb goes down to just the bottom of that first wedge. So let's just make sure that that's pretty close. Okay. And I could thin that slightly if I'm feeling it's a bit too wide. But roughly there is my little mitten shape. There's my thumb and the palm and my hand. That's all I need for Previs. So let's freeze transforms and delete history on both of those. And send their pivots to the belly button. Once more, duplicate special. And that hand shows up on exactly the same other side. So now we're going to steal these pieces. We do a lot of stealing and modeling. It's called mesh bashing or kit bashing, where you use pieces of one kit to create another. And I'm actually going to turn that so it's on its side there. If I freeze transforms, it will zero out that controller for me. Let's drop that down and use this as the basis for our foot. That's pretty close already. Like, it's really not that far from the size and shape a foot would be. So where are our feet in relation to the rest of our body? So it looks like the feet are about to head across. So probably look at the width of the hips, which are also about a head across. And I'm realizing that my thighs could probably stand to be a little bit bigger. I think everyone who does any sort of martial arts could agree with that statement. Okay, so there's our foot. Now, all we really have to do, I might increase that just slightly, is we can just drop the vertices back here. Let's rotate it out just a little bit. Probably too much. Let's create a cylinder that's just going to sit at the back of the foot to create that sense of the ankle dropping down into the heel of the foot. And I'll just bring that top of the cylinder in to about the same size as our joint. And that's just how we do things, isn't it? I think we could probably be a bit wider in the front there. Okay. So what we have here, and I do believe we can bring our vertices a little bit closer to where that sphere is. Alright, I don't want to get lost in modeling. Okay, we've got a foot. I always feel like it should be rotated more. And we will grab that foot and the cylinder that make it up. Freeze transforms, delete history. And we drop that back up again to the belly button. And once more, duplicate special. Okay. That, folks, is all there is to it. I'm going to center pivot on all these pieces, freeze transforms on all these pieces, and delete history on all these pieces. there is a character model with fairly clean proportions that can be used in a Previs animation or for blocking out a character body. Okay, so how would you do this for characters other than your generic humanoid? Well, I'm just going to come in. Let's search cartoon character proportions. So, alright, right away we've got these examples of cartoon characters. We've got a 5 head tall male, and they've broken down, okay, well, where is the shoulders going to be, the wrists, the knees, within that span. I used this 4 head tall character for one of my smaller little gnomish characters recently. And that torso itself was only made up of about 1.5, like 1 head, just barely. So what you would do is you would look through these proportional references and ask yourself, okay, do any of these have proportions similar to my character and what I'm going to be using in my animation? And if so, if any one of these has those similar proportions, just use that as your reference for modeling. Now, why wouldn't you actually base your character proportions on an image you draw yourself? Or your concept art in general? Well, historically, I mean, if you want concept art to be a good guide to follow, your concept artist has to have a fantastic grasp of anatomy and proportion themselves. And most studios, small to medium studios, don't have access to that. And most of our students certainly aren't trained how to do that within their 3D courses. So you will usually end up with character concept art that you can't use as proportional reference because it's highly stylized. So what you can do, however, is find proportional reference of another character that has similar body structure to your own, and just use that as your Previs guide. And then you build your stylized character on top of those proportional landmarks. Okay, let's wrap this video up. And if you have any questions, certainly feel free to leave them in the comments. In the meantime, take a look at the rigging for Previs videos to get an idea of how you would build a skeleton to go along with this character. Thank you and good night.